You are welcome to my channel. Do have a beautiful day and enjoy the story. Claire Morgan stood outside Sterling Corporation's gleaming glass building, clutching her one folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. No job, no money, rent overdue. She thought about the rejections she had been facing, but she felt she had enough confidence left to face another rejection. And sometimes desperation pushes you to try the impossible. She pulled open the massive door, straightened her second-hand blazer, and headed for the elevator, determined to drop off her resume without an appointment. Bold or foolish move, she didn't know or care anymore. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped in. Inside the elevator, a man stood alone, dressed in a simple, elegant suit, his gaze fixed on his phone. He didn't glance up as Claire stepped in, trying to appear confident. Claire flashed a small smile. Good morning. Morning, he answered absently. As the doors closed, an awkward silence filled the space. The soft hum of the elevator was deafening. Claire bit her lip. She couldn't help herself. Talking was her defense against nerves. You know, she said, elevators are kind of like life. Sometimes you're rising, sometimes you're falling, and sometimes, without warning, you just get stuck. The man raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Elevator philosophy. That's a new one. I have a PhD in random metaphors, Claire joked. Actually, I'm just here to drop off a resume. No appointment, no interview. Wild idea, huh? Bold, he said. Or desperate. Before Claire could reply, the elevator jolted violently. Lights flickered. Then everything stopped. Oh no, Claire whispered, gripping the handrail. The man went pale, leaning heavily against the wall. His breathing quickened. Sweat beaded at his forehead. Claire recognized the signs instantly. Hey, you're okay, she said gently. Breathe with me, in and out. He nodded stiffly, fighting panic. She kept talking, light-hearted nonsense about elevators, coffee disasters, and the time she accidentally emailed her resume to a pizza place. Her voice was soft, warm, steady. After a few minutes, he chuckled shakily. You're good at this, he muttered. I've been stuck plenty of times, she said, smiling. Not just in elevators. The elevator buzzed to life and began to move again. Claire breathed out a long sigh of relief. The man's shoulders eased. As the doors opened onto the reception floor, Claire turned to him. Nice surviving with you, she said lightly. He glanced at her badge, then smiled, a real, genuine smile that made him look years younger. Likewise, Claire. She blinked. How did he know my name? She was sure she hadn't said it. Before she could ask, he stepped through a side door and disappeared. Claire handed her resume to the receptionist, who barely glanced at her before tossing it into a tray. We're not hiring, she said with a dismissive tone. Claire nodded, swallowed her pride, and walked out into the glaring afternoon sun. Another door closed, another failure. Maybe dreaming was just for people who could afford it. Across town, high above the city, in a corner office lined with glass, Daniel Reed, CEO of Sterling Corporation, stared out at the skyline. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl in the elevator. The way she talked him through his fear without judgment. The way she laughed at chaos instead of folding under it. For 15 minutes, he hadn't been Daniel Reed, corporate king. He'd just been a man, trapped between two floors. Saved by the kindness of a stranger. He picked up the phone. HR, there's a resume that just came in. Claire Morgan, hire her. I don't want excuses. Claire was eating instant noodles on the couch that night when her phone rang. Hello, good evening, Miss Morgan. This is Sterling Corporation. We'd like to confirm your start date Monday. Claire almost dropped the phone. But I didn't even. I wasn't interviewed. Upper management made a direct decision. Welcome aboard, she screamed. She hugged Grace, her best friend and roommate. They jumped around the apartment like little kids. Maybe miracles happened after all. Monday felt like walking into a dream. Claire wore her neatest outfit, tied her hair back, and practiced polite greetings in the mirror. At the front desk, a smiling receptionist handed her a shiny new badge. Creative Strategies Department, she said. They're expecting you. Creative Strategies? Claire barely knew what that meant. But she wasn't about to ask questions. As she stepped into her new floor, a bubbly woman with a clipboard rushed up. You must be Claire. I'm Amy. Welcome. Coffee? Claire nodded, feeling completely overwhelmed. Amy led her to a desk plain, but clean, with a computer already set up. Taped to the monitor was a handwritten note. Welcome to the madness. You'll fit right in. Claire smiled and then froze, because standing by the coffee station, arms folded, was him. The man from the elevator. Daniel. He wasn't wearing a name tag now, but he didn't need one. Hey, he said softly, walking over. Nice to see you again. You You work here. He chuckled. Something like that. She frowned. Something was off. His posture, the way people nodded deferentially as he passed, it didn't add up. But before she could press him, Amy returned. Come on, we've got a welcome meeting. Claire's first brainstorm. The brainstorm was chaos. Sticky notes, coffee cups, whiteboards full of messy ideas. Daniel drifted through the room, listening quietly. When it was Claire's turn to present, her hands shook, but she pushed forward anyway. My campaign would be called Stop Pretending. She clicked to a slide showing two images side by side. A CEO claiming to care about employees. A worker eating lunch alone in a supply closet. The room burst out laughing, but the good kind, the kind that said, you get it. Claire smiled nervously. We're all tired of fake smiles and empty slogans. Honesty isn't weakness, it's strength. When she sat down, Daniel was the only one who didn't clap. Instead, he locked eyes with her. You're brave, he said, and that's rare. Over the next weeks, Claire grew into her new world. She made friends, found her rhythm. She even stopped triple-checking the printer instructions. But Daniel was a mystery she couldn't ignore. He showed up everywhere. At meetings, in hallways, during late-night brainstorming sessions. Always calm, always half-smiling, always leaving just enough unsaid to keep her wondering. One afternoon, after a grueling presentation, Claire found him by the coffee machine. You know, she said, teasing. You pop up like a ghost. He grinned. Maybe I'm haunting you. Mission accomplished, she said, smiling despite herself. He looked at her for a long moment. You're different, Claire. You see things clearer. She opened her mouth to reply, but he stepped closer. And you make me want to be seen too, he said, voice low. Before she could react, before she could overthink, he kissed her. That kiss changed everything. Their connection deepened, rich and complicated. But so did the whispers around the office. Claire heard them. The muttered comments, the curious glances. She tried to act normal, tried to work harder, stay later, be better. But the invisible wall was rising around her, and it was suffocating. Then came the worst blow. An anonymous complaint, an internal investigation. Claire was called into a cold conference room and questioned about her relationship with a senior employee. Her face burned with humiliation. Her work, her dreams, all reduced to gossip. When she confronted Daniel, he looked gutted. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I didn't want my name to cloud what we had. But it did, Claire whispered. And now, everything I worked for feels tainted. Daniel didn't know what to say. For 2 long weeks, Claire endured meetings under scrutiny, colleagues pulling away, her own doubts gnawing at her heart. And Daniel, he respected her space, gave her distance. But every time she caught his eye across a crowded room, she felt the weight of everything unsaid between them. Finally, the board ruled. No misconduct, no favoritism. Claire's promotion stood, earned on her own merit. The next morning, Claire found a small box on her desk. Inside was a tiny silver elevator charm, engraved with 2 simple words, where it all began. Her hands trembled. She knew what she had to do. That evening, Claire met Daniel at the old CAF they'd once joked about. He stood as she walked in, nervous for the first time since she'd met him. You scared me off once, she said quietly. But you never let go. Never, he said simply. She smiled, a real bright, fearless smile. Good, because I'm not running anymore either. Daniel pulled her into his arms. And right there in the middle of a half-empty CAF, they found their beginning. Not trapped, not lost, but exactly where they were supposed to be. Together. The months after Claire and Daniel found each other again were not perfect, but they were real. And that made all the difference. At work, things slowly shifted. The rumors died down. Her team saw her work for what it was. Sharp, bold, fearless. They saw Claire for who she was. They saw her individuality and her kind heart. Daniel kept his distance professionally, making sure Claire's brilliance stood on its own. But after hours, in quiet spaces outside the office where no titles mattered, they built something even stronger. Something no gossip or board meeting could touch. Trust, friendship and love. One evening, a few months later, Daniel handed Claire a set of keys. What's this? She asked, frowning. A project, he said with a mischievous grin. They drove across the city, to a small brick building with wide windows and high ceilings. Inside, the place was empty, just raw space and possibility. I bought it for you, he said. For us. For something new. Claire stared at him, heart pounding. I want to build a creative studio, Daniel explained. A place where ideas don't have to be filtered through 20 approval meetings. Where people like you can lead without fear. He placed the keys in her palm. and I want you to be the heart of it. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know what to say. So you'll dream with me, he whispered. I will, she said, her voice trembling. It was heartwarming. They called it the Idea House, an open studio for thinkers, dreamers, artists, and rule breakers. Claire poured her soul into it, painting the walls with bold colors, filling rooms with plants, fairy lights, and messy whiteboards covered in sketches. Daniel visited often, but he never interfered. He trusted her completely. Sometimes they worked side by side late into the night, with Daniel drafting strategy notes, Claire building marketing campaigns, music playing softly between them, and the world outside forgotten. It was, as Claire realized one evening while curled up on a battered couch, the life she hadn't even dared to dream of. One golden afternoon, nearly a year after the elevator, Daniel asked Claire to meet him somewhere special. He didn't say where. She followed the directions, heart pounding, to a winding trail behind the city, up into the hills, as the sun dipped low, turning the sky shades of gold and pink. Claire finally reached the top. There, under an ancient oak tree, fairy lights twinkled around a small wooden table.
There was a simple dinner, 2 glasses and a bottle of wine, and Daniel, standing in the fading sunlight, wearing no suit, no armor, just a soft white shirt and the most hopeful smile she'd ever seen. Claire gasped, tears springing instantly to her eyes. This, he said, stepping toward her, is where I realized I wanted forever with you. He dropped to one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth. Claire Morgan, he said, voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You saved me when I didn't know I needed saving. You showed me how beautiful life can be when you're brave enough to let someone in. I love you endlessly, foolishly, completely. Will you marry me? Her eyes blurred with tears. Claire gave a choked, joyful sound and then nodded furiously. Yes, yes. He slipped the ring onto her trembling finger, a delicate band shaped like intertwining vines, strong and alive, and kissed her under the glowing oak tree. Their wedding, they didn't want a grand ballroom or a glossy magazine wedding. Instead, they married in the garden behind the Idea House, surrounded by fairy lights, laughter, and friends who had believed in them when everything seemed impossible. Claire wore a simple flowing dress, with tiny pearls stitched into the hem. Daniel wore a light blue suit, no tie, just like he promised. Grace, her best friend, cried openly through the entire ceremony. Amy and half of Claire's creative team built a crazy flower arch from wild blooms they had picked themselves. As Claire and Daniel stood under that messy, beautiful archway, hand in hand, the officiant smiled. You are proof, she said, that love isn't found in perfect places but in the in-between moments, in the courage to keep climbing when life gets stuck between 2 floors. Claire laughed through her tears. She squeezed Daniel's hand tighter. Life wasn't a fairy tale after the wedding, but it was better than one. There were early mornings, coffee-stained reports, unexpected arguments, endless meetings, and there was laughter, forehead kisses, spontaneous road trips, and falling asleep tangled together on the couch after midnight brainstorming sessions. The Idea House grew faster than anyone predicted. Claire's campaigns were fresh, human, honest, and clients flocked to them. Sterling Corporation, too, thrived under a CEO who no longer hid behind glass walls but walked the halls smiling, remembering everyone's name, just like Claire once dared him to. On the anniversary of the day they met, that wild, terrifying day trapped in an elevator, Daniel surprised her again. He recreated the elevator. Right there inside the Idea House, they built a small wooden installation, complete with sliding doors and fairy lights. Over the entrance, a small plaque read, "Sometimes, getting stuck is exactly how you move forward." Inside, there was a tiny table with 2 coffees, a notebook full of dreams, and 1,000 unspoken promises. They sat inside it often, just the 2 of them,
talking about the next project, or the tiny house they wanted to build someday, or the baby names they hadn't told anyone about yet. Because now they weren't afraid of getting stuck. Not anymore. They knew that, as long as they had each other, they could find a way forward, every single time. Thank you for being part of our journey. At Chetnall's Graceful Narratives, every story plants a seed of hope. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more uplifting tales. Until next time, stay uplifted.